Welcome to our deep dive into one of history's most iconic battles, inside the Battle of Little Bighorn, Red Horse's eyewitness account. Step into the shoes of Red Horse, a Lakota warrior who witnessed firsthand the clash between his people and Custer's forces on that fateful day in 1876. Through his eyes, you'll experience the tension, the courage, and the desperate fight for survival. This battle wasn't just about strategy. It was about the very existence of a culture. If you're passionate about history and the untold stories behind it, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. The earth beneath my feet was cracked and dry, stretching out under a sky that showed no mercy. The occasional gust of wind stirred only the dust, offering no relief from the heat or the weight of what was to come. It was June 25th, 1876. The peaceful banks of the Little Bighorn River, where we had camped with our families, would soon be the site of one of the greatest battles our people would ever fight. History would call it Custer's last stand, but for us, it was another fight for survival. Around dawn, the quiet of our village was interrupted. Our scouts returned with urgent news. The U.S. Army, led by General Custer, was approaching from about 12 miles away. A cloud of dust rose in the distance, and it became clear that they were moving fast, preparing to strike soon. The peaceful setting belied the storm that had been brewing for days, a storm that would soon break upon us as we prepared for battle. We, the Lakota Sioux, along with the Northern Cheyenne and Arapaho, had gathered in large numbers, approximately 7,000 of us, including men, women, and children, at an encampment along the Little Bighorn River. This gathering was in response to the increasing pressure from the U.S. government and the violation of treaties that had once promised to protect our lands. The discovery of gold in the Black Hills, our sacred land, had brought an influx of settlers, and the U.S. government, disregarding the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, had opened the land to miners. The warriors among us knew that the peace we once had was fragile and conflict was inevitable. As Custer's forces approached, my thoughts turned to the land we were fighting for. The buffalo, which had been our lifeblood for generations, were beginning to disappear, just as our lands were being taken. I felt the weight of that loss as I prepared for battle. The buffalo were our life, I would later say, knowing that we were not just fighting to defend the ground beneath us, but for our culture, our spirit, and the future of our people. The land and the buffalo were part of who we were, and without them, we knew we would be lost. On the morning of June 25th, 1876, Custer's forces advanced toward our village, splitting into several groups as they approached. From our position, we couldn't clearly see all their movements due to the rugged terrain with many hills and ravines. We only knew they were drawing near. I still remember the sound of the first shots. It was from them. The soldiers fired on us first, I later recalled. The battle had officially begun. Custer believed he could surprise us by flanking the village from the north, but our warriors were prepared. While Major Reno's forces initially charged from the south and were forced to retreat, Custer attempted to attack from a different position. As his soldiers approached, the dust clouded their vision, and before they could fully organize, we launched a swift counterattack. The chaos of battle quickly unfolded, but our tactics were precise. We moved fast, surrounding Custer's battalion from all sides. Their formations, which were meant to be coordinated, began to crumble as they were outnumbered and overwhelmed by our warriors. The soldiers tried to hold their ground, but they were unprepared for the sheer number of warriors that emerged to meet them. At this point, Custer made a critical error in splitting his forces. He had divided his command into smaller units, sending Major Reno to attack the southern part of the village while keeping his own group to strike further north. This left his men isolated and vulnerable. We seized the opportunity to surround them. We attacked swiftly from all directions, on foot and horseback, using our knowledge of the terrain to outflank the soldiers. We attacked them from all sides, I later testified. noting how our warriors moved with coordination, while Custer's men struggled to organize in the midst of our onslaught. As we pressed forward, I saw many of Custer's soldiers fail to dismount quickly enough, leaving them vulnerable. Their horses panicked amidst the chaos, further adding to the confusion. The soldiers did not dismount, I later remembered. Many soldiers were killed on horseback. Their inability to adapt to the situation, to fight on foot and use the terrain as we did, proved fatal. While Custer's forces tried to hold their ground, our warriors formed skirmish lines, pressing them back toward the river and the steep bluffs. Some soldiers attempted to flee toward the river, but the current was swift and deadly. A great many soldiers were killed in the river, I recalled, their bodies later swept downstream. The water, which they had hoped would provide a route of escape, became a graveyard instead, claiming those who had tried to flee. I saw the moment when Custer's forces were fully surrounded and began to falter. Their movements became chaotic, marked by confusion and desperation. Though they tried to hold their positions, their lines broke quickly as we closed in from all sides. We capitalized on their disorganization, striking with greater intensity. Our knowledge of the land, our speed, and the coordination among our warriors were overwhelming for the soldiers. They had no way to escape. By the end of the day, Custer and over 200 of his men lay dead on the battlefield. Custer's body was found on a hill among his fallen soldiers, a grim symbol of the U.S. Army's defeat. But our victory came at a great cost, with many of our own warriors lost in the battle. The battlefield, once filled with the sounds of gunfire and the shouts of war, grew eerily quiet as the day came to an end. As I walked among the fallen soldiers and our own warriors, the weight of the day's events sank in. 36 of our bravest warriors had been killed, a loss we did not take lightly. The battlefield felt more like a graveyard than a place of victory, and I knew that while we had won this battle, the cost was still heavy. The joy of victory was muted by the sorrow for our fallen brothers. Our camp was filled with sorrow as well as triumph, I later reflected. The land we had fought so fiercely to protect now held the bodies of both our own people and the soldiers who had come to take it from us. We knew that this victory, though significant, was not the end of the fight for our way of life. After the battle, I turned to drawings to convey what we had witnessed. My sketches showed not celebrations, but the grim reality of war. Bodies of both soldiers and warriors lying lifeless. The land scarred by the violence of that day. These images were not created to celebrate our victory, but to remember the cost of war. For in war, there are no true victors, only survivors and the memories of those who fell. Though we had defended our village that day, I knew in my heart that this would not be the end. We knew the soldiers would return, I later said, for the U.S. Army, wounded by their defeat, would regroup and return with even greater force, and return they did. In the aftermath of the battle, many in the U.S. Army and public questioned Custer's decisions. His aggressive tactics were scrutinized. Why had he divided his forces and attacked with so few men against such a large village? Some blamed him for the defeat, while others called him brave. But for us, this battle was never about Custer's mistakes. It was about the survival of our people, our culture, and our land. We did not fight for military glory, but for the continuation of our way of life, something far more precious. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was not just Custer's last stand. It was a fight for our existence. We were fighting for our survival, I said. The myths surrounding the battle often glorify the U.S. Army's bravery, but the truth is that we were defending our families, our culture, and our way of life against an invading force. That is what this battle was truly about. As I look back on that day, I remember not just the battle, but the deeper struggle it represented. We fought to protect what we held dear, our land, our freedom, but we knew that our victory was only a momentary reprieve. The U.S. Army would return, and the fight for our survival would continue. Indeed, within a year, the military came back with greater force, pushing our people onto reservations. In honoring the memory of those who fought and died with me that day, I honor the resilience of the Native American people. We were not just fighting soldiers. We were fighting for the future of our people, our culture, and the very land that had sustained us for generations.